Hello, Miss Donald here. We're back for the next instalment of Thing by David Williams and illustrated by Tony Ross. Once again, thank you to HarperCollins for allowing us to share this story together. So, chapter 4. Now, if you remember, we've met Myrtle Meek and she is not very kind and she's a little bit spoiled. She's quite mean to her mum and dad, and in the last chapter, she demanded a thing. No one knows what a thing is, but I guess Mum and Dad are going to try and find out. So let's find out what happens. Chapter 4, Bestest Best. After breakfast that morning, Mr. and Mrs. Meek gave their daughter a lift to school. And I mean lift, literally. Every morning they were forced to lift her up and carry her there. Myrtle refused to walk, even though it was only a short distance away. Look at that. It was a mighty effort carrying her. As she mostly ate chocolate, Myrtle was as heavy as an ox. A really heavy ox at that. One that might win a rosette for heaviness. Goodness me. Put me down, Myrtle ordered as her parents made their final stagger to the school gates. Once they'd carefully lowered her to the ground, Father passed his daughter her industrial-sized lunchbox. It was so big and heavy, it was on wheels. Have a lovely day at school, my sweetest of hearts, he said. Don't forget, by the time I get home from school, I want a thing, she bawled, before waddling off into the playground, knocking several smaller children to the ground as she did so. Oof, oof, oof. My angel of heaven, we promise we will do our absolute bestest best, called out Mother brightly. This stopped Myrtle in her tracks. Slowly, she turned round and reached into her lunchbox. Bestest best isn't good enough, she hollered. Myrtle pulled out one of the tall cartons of chocolate milk and lobbed it at her mother. Whiz, splat! Ah! It hurt poor Mrs. Meek right in the face, soaking her and her pink flowery dress. Thank you kindly, remarked the lady, not sure what else to say. Father passed his wife the handkerchief he always kept in his breast pocket. There we are, Mother. Mrs. Meek dabbed at the chocolate milk. It was little use. The pink flowery dress was now a brown, chocolatey mess. Best is better than best, appealed Father. Once again, Myrtle reached into her lunchbox. Oh dear, muttered Father, closing his eyes as he was sure something was about to be lobbed in his direction. He was right. Zoom! Splurge! A bucket of chocolate mousse hit him, bang, on the top of his head. Thank you muchly, he said, like his wife, not knowing what else to say. Without a word, Mother passed the handkerchief back to her husband and he attempted to demousse himself. Unfortunately, this sort of thing happened every morning to poor Mr. and Mrs. Meek. Indeed, Father still had a piece of double chocolate cake in his ear from last week's packed lunch volley, which he had been saving for his lunch. Don't worry your pretty little head, called out Father, lying. There was nothing pretty or little about Myrtle's head. We will have a thing for you as soon as you are home from school. You better, replied Myrtle, or else. Neither Mr. Meek nor Mrs. Meek knew what else was, but whatever it was, it sounded nasty. Dring! The school bell rang. As soon as Myrtle began lumbering off towards her classroom, Father took his wife's hand. Oh, you are very forward, Mr. Meek, she remarked. I know the perfect place to start looking for a thing, said the librarian. Where? The library, of course. Chapter 5, Giant Poops. Mr. and Mrs. Meek bolted down the street. They were quite a sight, both covered as they were in chocolatey brown gunge. The pair looked like two giant poops making a dash for freedom. Whoosh! As soon as they reached the doors to the library, they slowed to a stroll. Pitter, patter. The library and the library vaults. After all, the library is a place where you should always be on your best behaviour, especially if you're a librarian. Ooh, where do we begin? Whispered an out-of-breath father as they strolled through the aisles and aisles of floor-to-ceiling books, leaving a trail of brown sludge behind them. Ooze. The dictionary, replied an out-of-breath mother. Their eyes searched the shelves of dictionaries until they found the widest, weightiest one. They eased it off the shelf together. The book was almost as heavy as their daughter. Mrs. Meek eagerly flicked through the pages until she reached the long, long list of words that began with f. However, soon a word that began with f, frustration, was painted all over her face. Thing isn't in the dictionary, she whispered. Oh, for goodness sake, exclaimed father. Shh, shushed Mrs. Meek, pointing to a sign that her husband himself had put up, which read, silence. Sorry, he mouthed, before continuing in hushed tones. That doesn't mean there is no such thing as a thing. There are thousands and thousands. And thousands of books in the library. Surely one of them must mention a thing. But what books should we look at next, father? Well, let's think, mother. What does a thing sound like to you? Both went into deep concentration. A rude-shaped vegetable, guessed mother, reaching for the big book of rude-shaped vegetables. An annoying board game, suggested father, as he looked down a history of annoying board games. A very distant planet, said mother, as she found the universe and beyond the beyond of the beyond. Books, books and more books tumbled off the shelves. Books about the human body, books about motor cars, books about flowers, books about antiques, books about books. Could a thing be that thing that's left in your plug hole after a bath? Suggested father. An unidentifiable item of clothing you find in the tumble dryer, guessed mother. Guesses were volleyed back and forth like tennis balls. Something sticky you find up your nose that isn't a bogey. A mysterious stain. The gangling bit of a jellyfish. A prize from a Christmas cracker that you never actually work out what it is. Something you find stuck to a dog. That dangly bit of your belly button that looks like the end of a balloon. The fluffy stuff you find between your toes. The opposite of a thong, exclaimed Mrs. Meek. What's a thong? asked Mr. Meek. I don't know, she replied, downcast. Hours passed until the exhausted pair had searched through every single book in the library. Even my ones, David Williams' ones. Really, they should have looked through this book, but of course it hadn't been written yet. Just as they were about to admit defeat and brace themselves for the wrath of their daughter, Mrs. Meek had a thought. There is one last place we haven't looked, she said. Where? He asked eagerly. The ancient vaults of the library. That's where all the old books are kept. We might find a clue down there. Mr. Meek gulped. But, Mrs. Meek, we librarians are strictly forbidden to go down to the vaults. Everybody is forbidden. Nobody has been down there for 100 years. There we go. That was the end of chapter 5. I wonder what they're going to find in the vault. It's very exciting. I do love a cliffhanger. We will find out what happens next in our next instalment next week. Take care and stay safe, and see you soon. Bye.